Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Okay, as we all settle, as we all get ready for practice today, it is my honor to be here today. I am Denise Mays, and I am the Director of Enrollment for the Strozzi Institute. And it's my pleasure to be here to start our practice for April 2023. Later on, I am going to share some information, some free opportunities and ways to connect and practice, along with details of upcoming somatic coursework at the Strozzi Institute. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our topic today, commitment and extension. And it's also my pleasure to introduce to you our teacher, our Strozzi teacher today, Pete Hamill. Welcome, Pete.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here, and it's lovely to see some very familiar faces on the call. So to those of you who I've met before, I send a hug. It's lovely to see you again. And to those of you who I'm meeting for the first time, well, it's lovely to meet you. So we're going to get going with our dojo today, but before I do, I'll just say a little bit about myself. I'm Pete Hamill. I am a Strozzi Institute teacher. I've been in this body of work for about 20 years now. And I teach a lot of the programs that run in Europe. So I'm based in England, in the UK, and I live down here on the south coast in a place called Brighton. And I've already spotted that there's someone else here from Brighton as well. So good to see you again, Ewan. And yeah, I live down here on the south coast of England with my wife and our 9-year-old daughter. I think we'll just get into doing some practice together. What we're going to do, just to give you a sense of the process today, is we'll do some practices together. I'll then talk a little bit about commitment and extension and what we're meaning by that. We'll do some practices that are based around the idea of extension, and then we'll have some time to ask questions and answer any questions that you have. Okay? As we get into this, it's really lovely. I'm aware not everybody's going to be able to do this, but if you can, to have your camera on so that we have a sense of connection to a group of people. And I get that that's not going to be possible for everybody, but where it is possible, it just allows us to have a sense of being in community together. It's not quite the same as when we're actually together in the room, but it's, yeah, as close as we can get virtually. Okay, so I'm going to stand up. You can stand or sit for this process, but we're going to start off with a basic centering practice. Just raise that up. So, depending on the part of the world that you're in and the time zone that you're in, this may be the first thing that you're doing in the morning, or it may be something that you're doing at the end of a day. So whatever it is for you, or somewhere in the middle, whatever it is for you, just allow yourself to arrive to this moment from whatever you've just come from. Allow yourself to kind of be in this moment rather than being in what was just before or what's going to come next. Allow yourself to be in this moment. And do that by just dropping your attention into your body and feeling into your body. And feel and notice what there is to notice in your body today. Maybe that there's some aches and pains, maybe that there's some numbness, maybe that there's some energy, excitement, movement happening in your body. Just notice whatever that is and welcome it. It's all good. Let's just notice what it is. And then we're going to center our bodies, center our somas in the 3 dimensions that we live in: length, width, and depth. So we start off centering in length by extending up and relaxing down. Extending up, almost imagining that you're putting some air between the vertebrae. Stepping fully into your lengths. And then relaxing down so that we're not pushing ourselves up or holding ourselves up artificially. We're allowing gravity to do its work. And feel your connection to the earth. And relaxing your shoulders and your jaw, anywhere else where you know you hold tension. Allow yourself to relax. And see if you can feel the weight of your body through your feet into the floor, almost like the floor is coming up to meet you and to support you. extending up, relaxing down. So length in this work we refer to as the domain of dignity, in that we know the first thing that happens to us when something diminishes our dignity is we collapse in length. So in holding ourselves in length, we're holding ourselves in dignity. And if we don't hold ourselves in dignity, how do we expect other people to do the same? So we hold ourselves in dignity. And then the next dimension we want to center in is the dimension of width, left to right. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to take a breath into the chest and the abdomen, but allow your ribcage to move left to right rather than front to back. Feel your own boundaries. Allow yourself to take up some space. And do that again. And really see if you can feel the edges of yourself, your boundaries. Notice what it's like to open up the chest, open up the rib cage, to allow ourselves to be visible and to take up the space that we're due in the world. Really feel our width. Width in this work we talk about as being the social dimension, the domain of connection and relationships with others. So when I collapse in width and I hold myself really narrow like this, part of what I'm doing is I'm giving up my space in the world that I'm due. I'm giving up the space, and there are certain people who will take that space. And that's not just in the physical domain, that's in the conversational, social, emotional domain. So by allowing ourselves to take up space in width, we're allowing ourselves to hold boundaries, to have balance with our boundaries. We're allowing ourselves to be visible. So we center in length for dignity, we center in width for boundaries. And then finally, we center in depth, front to back. Finding a balance between our weight on the heels and the balls of our feet. Trying to find a place where we're not kind of leaning into the future, anticipating what's next, where we're not kind of hanging out in the past about what was, but we bring ourselves into the present moment, allowing ourselves to be present to this moment. We can feel our backs, we can feel our past and our history. We can feel our fronts, we can feel the unfolding moment at the tip of our nose. But we do that from the present. And take a deep breath down into the chest and abdomen, and a nice long exhale. And then we bring our attention to our body's center of gravity. If you take your right hand and you put your thumb on your navel, your hand will rest nicely on your center. And just bring your attention to that place. And what that means is kind of feel from that place. Don't think about it as an abstract intellectual concept, but actually feel it. And then let your hand drop away, but keep your attention there. And in this place, if you've been on one of the programs, you'll know that this is a place where we repeat our declaration. If you haven't been on a program, then in this place, just get in contact with something that is important to you. An intention, a purpose, something that has meaning to you. And just bring that to mind, bring that to presence of mind for yourself. And kind of allow your nervous system to organize around that which is important to you. And as you do that, just notice the impact on your mood. Notice your mood as you do that, as you organize your nervous system around that which is important. Okay. So let's come back together. And as we come back together, just drop your mood in the chat. Dropping your mood. We notice our mood. It's a really important aspect of this work is to always pay attention to our mood. Moods are infectious. And the first way we take responsibility for them is by noticing them. Okay, lots of lovely moods. Spacious, sadness, peaceful, and flow, relaxed, tender, energized. All is welcome. All is welcome. There's no right mood. It doesn't have to be positive. It can be painful and difficult and all of that too, because that's what being human is. Lovely. Okay. So today's topic. Today's topic is the subject of extension. And well, I guess what do we mean by extension is the place that I want to start off with here. So at the very simple level, sitting here in front of you at the moment, I have a cup of tea beside me. And whenever I get thirsty, I have the impulse, the desire to reach towards and take my cup of tea and have a drink. And it requires an extension of myself towards what it is that I want, towards what it is that I care about. And so in the act of doing that, there's a physical act of extending my arm out to reach my cup, to take it, and to bring it forward for myself. And that at the most basic level is extension. And as children, young children can be at times very uninhibited in their extension towards what they want. Sometimes a little too uninhibited in their extension towards what they want, looking for the cookie jar or whatever it is that they want. Or at a very basic level, just even looking for a hug and extending towards you as another human being looking for a hug. And there are lots of ways as we grow and develop where we kind of learn not to extend, or we learn ways of extending. And we learn patterns in how we extend. And so it's really interesting for us to start to notice is like, are we actually able to extend from center towards that which we care about? You know, the first place is knowing what we care about, which was the subject of a previous community dojo. But once we know what we care about, we have to extend towards it. And that requires an energetic act of movement towards what we care about, of extending ourselves towards it, of really reaching out for something that's important to us. And when we look at, you know, our declarations, this is the term that we use for that which is important to us in this work. So when we look at our declarations, our commitments, the things that we care about, pretty much all of them require an extension of self towards something. They require us to reach out to and to connect with others. Even a very personal declaration, which is about me, will require me reaching out and connecting with and orienting around my friends, my relationships, my intimates, my colleagues, whatever it is, my family. It will require some level of extending out what it is that I want to move towards in relationship with other people. And one of the things that we want to pay attention to is, are we able to extend our commitments towards other people in such a way that that touches them, that moves them, that connects with them, that has an impact upon them? That's part of what we need to be able to do. And pretty much everything that we are working on, from the small scale, personal, very, just me and my world, right the way to I'm trying to take leadership of a large group of people to make a difference to something that I truly care about in the world. All of those things require connecting with other people, touching them, moving them, connecting with them in some way. And in doing so, we are making ourselves visible. We're extending our concerns and articulating our concerns into the world in a way which makes us somewhat vulnerable. It leaves us, it opens us up, I say. It would open us up and leaves us in some ways vulnerable and often emotional, curious, unsure. How will people react? What will they say? Will they go with it? Will they work with me? All of that stuff. And because of all of that, we can get very goofy in this moment of extension. And all of our patterns and all of our history can start to show up in this moment of making ourselves visible and vulnerable, whereby for some of us, what we do is we extend in a way that is determined, really determined. Like, I will make this happen. Nobody is going to get in my way. I am going to push through, and nobody, all of that energy. And that can be one way in which we extend into the world. And I can see a few smiles on the screen, which suggests a few people are familiar with that particular way of operating. So there's a way in which that can become an habitual pattern. And in doing that, I often lose my center. I lose my centeredness. And I become attached to the outcomes. And I become attached to the way in which things have to happen. And I can lose the connection with other people. And I can ultimately lose the connection with myself, because it becomes about an abstract, objective, this has to happen, definitive, push kind of energy. For other people, what can happen is that we can, in the moment of extending towards something we care about and making ourselves vulnerable, we can withdraw. We can withdraw our extension, disappear, hide a little bit, move away from that which could be scary. And that's one of the other patterns that we see, is like I can, at some level, find myself disappearing in that moment and not actually being willing to commit myself to it. And our rational brains are wonderful, because they'll provide us lots of good reasons why it's not the right time or the right moment or the right person or the right whatever. There's a million things that can be the wrong version of. So our rational brains will support us and tell us all the good reasons why actually it was the right thing to do, to withdraw and to give up and to not extend towards our commitment. And in doing so, of course, we disconnect from that which is really important to us. We disconnect from our commitments, and we are actually at that point more connected with our fears, with our history, our conditioning, our shaping over time. So we can find ourselves withdrawing our capacity to do that. The other common one that I see around extension is that for some people, they'll start the process of extending, especially where another person is concerned. They'll extend towards somebody else, and then they'll lose all of their cares and concerns completely. They're like, it'll all become about the other person then. It's like, oh, it's like, how do I make sure I take care of your needs, your cares, your concerns? I'm no longer extending my current cares and commitments into the world, because in that moment of seeing another person there, it's like all of a sudden, my entire attention goes to them and making sure their needs are met. And actually, I forget about mine. And I abandon them somewhere at the side of the road while I look after somebody else and their needs. So there are different patterns that we can get into regarding what it is to extend our energy towards what we care about. And, for many of us, it can be safer to stay into our patterns. It's like, if I get determined and push through, I don't have to feel the vulnerability. If I withdraw, I don't have to feel the vulnerability. If I make it all about the other person, then I don't actually have to share what's really important with me. And again, I don't have to feel the vulnerability. It's all wonderful ways in which we can avoid feeling the vulnerability of extending something that's truly important to us and saying, actually, this is important. This is what I want for myself, for my family, for my community, for my friends, for my work colleagues, whatever it is, the movement I'm a part of. So we can find lots and lots of ways in which we can withdraw from that and make ourselves comfortable. And the practice in this work is the practice of trying to bring ourselves back, recenter, and find a way to extend from center that which is truly important to us in a way that connects with and touches and moves other people, so that we have a community of support, so that we have the movement that we need to achieve what we need to achieve, so that we have the team working around us in a way that's actually moving towards the future that we want to generate in the world, whatever that is, so that we have the family around us that are supporting us in what's truly important to us. So that's really what we want to practice inside of this. That's what we mean by extension, and that's what we're talking about when we talk about the importance of extension in this work. We, for those of you who are familiar with the actor, the now dead actor, Sir Laurence Olivier, he was very famous that when he went on stage, and he did stage work throughout his whole life, but when he went on stage, people in the audience said they felt him, they felt his presence. Like he walked on stage and you knew. And I think that was a combination of a presence that he'd cultivated, but also an attention on his audience, a desire to connect with his audience, whether he was speaking or not, whether he was, whatever it was he was doing, he was moving towards his audience in an energetic sense, in an extension of energy, of connection, of actually I'm here and I'm engaged with you. And that created a way in which people really felt his presence. And when people talked about his acting, they felt the emotions that he was expressing as a character. They felt his experience in terms of what he was trying to portray. And that's what makes wonderful acting. It's what makes, that capacity in a theater where we suspend disbelief and allow ourselves to enter into the play as an audience. That's enabled by that quality of presence and extension. But it's not just for actors. It's for all of us as we seek to engage and connect with others. It's that presence and that extension that allows people to move with us, to engage with us, to feel moved by us, moved into action, so that they work with us towards what we care about. So we're going to do a little bit of a practice on this. And so for this practice, you can stay seated or standing, whichever you prefer. I'm going to stay seated for this one. And all I'm going to ask you to do for this first one is just raise your arm in front of you like you're reaching for something, like you're going to grab an orange or something like that. Or for the Americans here, you'd say a softball. For kind of anybody from the rest of the world, that's kind of something the size of an orange. So you're moving towards something that kind of size. And just hold your arm up like that for a moment and allow yourself to be extending towards, reaching towards something. It's like you're reaching towards what you care about. And just imagine that what you care about, your commitment, your declaration, what's really important to you, is just beyond the reach at the moment, but you're reaching towards it. And then as you do that, just allow yourself to give up. Allow your arm to drop and give up. And just do that a few times, extending towards what you care about, just out of reach, something that's important, and then give up, let it drop. It's like you're not gonna keep pushing. You've withdrawn, it's too much, it's too difficult. It drops. Okay, different one. So this one, what I want you to do is now get really determined. I'm gonna get it. Like almost clench your fist if you like this time it's mine. I'm getting it Nobody's going to get in my way. And I'm pushing towards this future, this outcome. And just notice how that feels. How does it feel to really push and let it go? Go back to just reaching, and then go back to pushing. Push, push, push. Like, I'm going to get this. Nobody's going to stop me. I'm determined. It's mine. Oh, and then let that go. Now notice again, one of those may be more familiar to you than the other, but just notice which one that is. And then this time, what I want you to do is to center yourself. So seated or standing, paying attention to length, standing up, relaxing down. Paying attention to width, extending left to right. Allowing your rib cage to fill up and move out. Paying attention to depth, the balance front to back. Not hanging out in the future, not hanging out in the past. And really bring your attention down to the body's center of gravity again. Use breath, nice long exhale. And bring your attention down. And feel from that place. And we always encourage you in this work to do this with your eyes open. It's easier with your eyes closed, but we need to be able to do it in the world in engagement with others. And this time, bring your hand up like you're holding an orange, reaching for something. And this time, what I want you to do is to stay centered, stay connected to yourself, feel your center, but almost then feel like there's energy that's coming up from your center and that's going out through your hand towards what you're committed to. Like you're extending towards this future. You're not having to fight. You're not having to push. Neither are you giving up, but you're staying connected to your commitment. Like, this is what I'm here for. This is what I'm committed to. Allowing that energy to stream through your arm, out through your fingers, right the way through your computer screen, to the wall, to the horizon, whatever's in front of you. Just like you're going to keep on going and keep on going. And then let that go. So the last one is centered extension. The practice of extending from center, staying connected to myself. How do I know if I'm centered? I'm centered, I can feel myself. I'm not losing connection with myself. But my energy is still extending into the world. So I'm not losing connection with the world either. This is a really tricky thing to develop. I'm going to be connected to myself and connected out in the world at the same time. For most of us, we tend to default to one or the other. Either attention internal or attention external. Here, what we're looking to do is to cultivate the ability to bring both to bear. How can I be centered and connected to myself, and how can I connect with the world? That enables me to take responsive action in the world. It enables me to strive to move towards what I care about in a responsible way, because I'm not either defaulting to my needs or defaulting to the world's needs. I'm being able to be aware of both. So that's part of what we're connecting with. Let's take the practice a step further. So this time we're not going to have any arms involved. The arms make it easy in some ways to learn because it involves the extensor muscles. We're extending out and it gives us that kind of physical felt sense of extension. But this time we're not going to do that. We're going to do extension, but with our bodies. So no arms involved, but we're going to practice what it is to try to extend from our whole bodies, extending towards another human being. So in order to do this, we're going to start off, first of all, with actually not being extended. So bring your energy in. Like I'm not connecting with anybody else right now, I'm just connecting with me. And as you do this, notice Notice what people look like. Notice what I look like. Notice what others look like as they bring their energy in. Notice how it feels to be with a group of people who aren't extending, who are holding their energy inside. Everything that becomes very internal. Notice whether or not you even want to look at other people. You may find that you're actually looking at other people is not something you even want to do. You just want to keep your energy inside, staying protected, safe, lacking vulnerability. Okay, and then move out of that and shake it off. For some of you, that may feel familiar. For some of you, that may feel less familiar. Okay, this time, what we're going to do is practice extending our energy all the way out. And this, what I mean by this is like we're going to lose ourselves. So you're going to choose somebody on the screen, just choose one other person. And with that person, what I want you to do is to be like, make it all about them. Like extend out, like all you need to do is take care of them. Like you're going to lose any internal sense of connection to yourself. It's going to be about them and their needs, whoever that person is. And notice what it's like just to lose connection with yourself, become so focused on another person that you lose yourself. That person's needs, that person's wants. Like it becomes all about them. And just notice what it looks like to see people doing this. And notice what it feels like to be doing it yourself. Is it familiar? Is it unfamiliar? What happens to you when you lose yourself like this and it becomes all about somebody else? And then bring your energy back in. Notice how that was for you. For some of you, that may feel familiar. For some of you, may feel less familiar. Shake it off. Just get comfortable back in yourself so that you're not carrying too much of that. Yeah, that can be a little weird. Some of you may have noticed that you were able to feel what it was like to have all of that attention on you in that way. You may have noticed that that felt, you will have noticed something about it. Okay, so this time let's start off with centering ourselves. Centering in length, extending up, relaxing down. Centering in width, allowing ourselves to fill out our bodies left to right. Opening up our chests, being present. And then centering in depth, front to back, finding a balance point. Finding a place where you're not peeing into the future or hanging out in the past. Breath, pay attention to breath and a nice long exhale. And bring your attention to the body's center of gravity. And then your challenge, and know like this may be difficult, that's all right, it's a practice. Your challenge is to see whether or not you can find a way to extend energetically towards someone on the screen, but don't lose your sense of self. Like stay connected to yourself at the same time. I can feel me, I can feel, perceive somebody else. I don't have to give up one to do the other. Finding a balance. And in this place, get really present to what it is that's important to you. Your commitment, your declaration, whatever purpose or whatever meaning, whatever is important to you at this moment. And just be present with that and almost imagine like you're extending that towards the person you're connecting with. Like you're trying to engage them in that thing that's so important to you. But from a centered place. connected to them, connected to you, not losing yourself, not getting determined, just connecting. And noticing how that is for you. Okay. So allowing yourself, you can relax now. You don't need to be performing. There's a way in which when we're doing these practices, it can feel a little, you can just relax into it. It's okay. So what I want to do now is pause and just check if there are any questions or things that have come up that people want to ask about this moment. Any questions? You can raise your hand, you can type one in the chat, whatever works for you.
I have a question.
Sure. Who's that?
How we can identify in the moment, if we are using these patterns that you mentioned, like the withdrawal or the other ones, and how we can change that.
Mm-hmm. Maria, is it Maria, isn't it? Who's asking the question?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, couple of things that are in part of that. First one is, do you have a sense of what your pattern, your most common pattern is?
Yes.
Yeah. Which one is it? Do you mind if you're on mute at the moment?
Yes. So, okay. I mute. No,
you're not on mute.
Oh, okay. So I think, well, it depends, but I think withdrawal is one of the one.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And when you did the exercise, when we were doing the exercises, what about that felt familiar to you?
It's my first time, so I'm trying to. So it's like a, I perhaps I didn't feel everything. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. It's okay. So what did you notice though? What did feel familiar?
I won't mute again. Well, I could feel certain things in my body. That one, yes, I can. I could feel tensions. That's what I, in certain part of my body. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. So the simplest thing to start with is to start to notice those tensions. Because those tensions that were showing up in the exercise will be what shows up in life. And those tensions are often a response to the sense of vulnerability that we feel. So, sometimes when you go to the dentist and they're doing something that's painful and you tense up in order kind of to not feel it quite so much, well, the same thing can happen emotionally. And when we feel that sense of vulnerability that we experience when we're extending out into the world, that which is important to us, we can tense up to try to not feel some of the vulnerability, some of the self-doubt, some of just the stuff that goes on for us as human beings. And so in that tension then has a pattern to it, a shaping to it, which gives us the habitual action that we take. And so the first place to do is start to notice is like, what is that tension? How do I feel it? How do I experience it? When do I experience it? And is to really pay attention to it. I often say to new clients, the starting point in this work can sometimes be almost like being an anthropologist on yourself. Like you're just going to stand back and study. It's like, oh, wow, I do that. Every time in this situation, I do this thing. That's really interesting. And it has this pattern and this shape and this feeling inside my body. And all of this stuff goes on with me. Wow, that happens every time. And that's the first place. So the first place is to really notice. Because the more that we get to know our habitual patterns, the more choice we have over them. Because those patterns shape us in a particular direction. Second thing we then need to do is we need to center. And in centering ourselves, part of what we do is we develop the ability to be with the discomfort that we're running away from without being overwhelmed by it. So it's like we have a strategy of dealing with that discomfort, which is clenching and tensing and withdrawing in your case. Yeah. Each of our patterns will be slightly different in terms of the kind of shaping of it, but we'll have our own pattern. And so we get to know that, and then we start to develop what's a different way of coping with that than my habitual response. And the different way is to center. And so we practice centering ourselves. And so I tell most of my clients to center themselves, 4, 5, 6 times a day. Generally, before they click join on any Zoom or Teams meeting is generally a good way to get in a good number of repetitions every day. And we practice centering ourselves, and we practice so that we have the capacity to do it. And as we get to know our habitual patterns over time, we start to develop as the capacity to see them in the moment. And that gives us the capacity to center. It's like, oh, I have the capacity to do something different now. I've got to know my habitual response well enough. I see it in the moment, and I've got to practice my centering well enough that I can do it in the moment. Then all of a sudden I have the capacity for a different action. And then sometimes we need to practice a different action. So that's where practicing a centered extension can be really helpful to us. Practicing consciously, taking time to practice what it is to center and to extend energetically towards other people. So when I was younger, in my younger days, the way I practiced that was I practiced that trying to get served at a busy bar in London. And I would, standing around the bar, and there's kind of crowds of people, maybe on a Friday or Saturday night, and it's hard to get served and get the attention of the barman. I would practice a centered extension as a way to reach out and to extend towards the man or woman behind the bar and connect with them. Almost like, I used to imagine like I was tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hello, I'm here. I'd like to get served. And that was just like a really simple way when I was young that I used to practice what it was to extend from center. So we can find ways and places that we can practice doing something different. So we develop our somatic awareness. We practice centering so that we have the capacity to interrupt our habitual pattern. And then we practice something different. And with time and practice, that new different action becomes the habitual pattern. Does that answer your question, Maria?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Welcome. Any other questions that have come up?
Pete, I see a couple of questions in our chat here, asking for a little more information about extending. Yeah, we see one here for, here's one. I found I need a longer time to come back to center after the first round of extending. Could you speak to recentering in the context of dysregulation from trauma medicine?
Okay, yeah. Let me see, that's a big question and a big subject. So I'm just kind of thinking, where do I start in answering that question? So yes, some of the, when we do some of these practices and we practice some of the habitual patterns, what that can do for some of us is it can evoke part of our history. It's like there's a reason why we do the things that we do. We haven't developed patterns of response and behavior in the world just out of nowhere. We haven't made them up as kind of mischievous kids, or we've done them because we were kind of, I don't know, up to something weird in the world. We develop these patterns out of an adaptive strategy to try to survive and thrive in the circumstances that we found ourselves as we were developing. So one of the things that can happen is that as we play with any of these practices, any of these bodily practices, is we kind of at times find ourselves connecting to the reasons why we developed these practices, the reasons why we developed our current range of practices, our current ways of being. And when we do that, one of the things that can happen is if they happened in a moment that was quite significant for us or even traumatic for us, then part of what can happen is we can really, there could be a sense of dysregulation that can develop. It's like we can be caught in the moment of taking on an habitual pattern and go, oh, wow, I'm back in this. I'm feeling lots of stuff and it takes me a long time to find my way back out of it. And the broad thing that I'd say is at one level, all of that's okay. That's the first thing that I'd say. It's like all of that is okay. That is just our history. And each of us, our history will come up in different places and different times and different moments. So for some people, it will come up in some of the extension exercises. Other people, it'll come up somewhere else. And it's all good. It's all welcome. And if it takes us a little bit longer to come back, that's okay. I mean, that has to be okay. That is just the fact that for us, it has connected to a part of our history that has significance for us and that we're feeling inside of that moment. So I suppose the first thing that I want to say is like to really normalize that, to make it okay, to not have any kind of shaming or bad or wrong about it, and for you not to make it bad or wrong for yourself, if that's happened for you, because getting annoyed and frustrated and making it bad or wrong is a way to get into a fight with it, which doesn't tend to be that productive. So first level is like, great, that's all right, that you're noticing something. And if you miss out on the next bit of the practice, that's okay, because what you've discovered is significant for you and that's what you needed to learn. That would be the first level. Now, there's another level to that, which is, okay, so what do we do with that? And how do we work with that? And where do we go next? So the first thing that I'd say is when we find a connection to something which has that level of significance for us, we move slowly. That's not the place where we want to try to move quickly. We want to allow ourselves to move slowly with that and work with it in a slow way. And what I mean by that is we're touching into some historic emotions which were probably overwhelming for us at a certain moment in our histories. And part of what we did was we found a way to cut off from feeling those emotions because it was too much. And so we want to allow ourselves to get slowly back in touch with it. And if we find that getting in touch with all of it is just too much and is overwhelming, then we don't try to stay in contact with all of it. We just go, what is it if I can allow myself to enter into the practice like 10%? Like, I'm not going to do it full on. I'm just going to do like 10% and see what that's like and see what my nervous system feels and experiences when I do that, so that I get a real sense of like, how can I build myself up to this? How can I build myself up to feeling all of this and experiencing all of this in a slow process? So when we're working with something that is touching into any kind of historical trauma, we move slower than if we're working in another domain. We want to be mindful and cautious and gentle with it and accepting of it. What we learned was probably a sensible thing to do given what we experienced. Our habitual response that we learned was a sensible thing to do given what we experienced. And so what we want to do is give space to that, allow that, and then see if we can find ways to bring ourselves more and more back in touch with what sits underneath that. This is a place where it's really helpful to work with somebody who's experienced in working with trauma in the body, because that's, if you find yourself connecting into an historical trauma, that can be really helpful, is to work with somebody who's got practice of both trauma and the body at the same time. That's the short answer to that question. There's a longer, more detailed answer, but I think I'll probably stop there unless there's any follow-up questions to that.
Hi, I have a quick question. Were we on the extending, were we supposed to come up on our toes and then down, or just stay grounded?
So who was that? I couldn't see who was speaking, actually.
Hi, this is Keela.
Hi, Keela. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Thank you. That's just really helpful. So whenever we're extending from center, we'll stay grounded. The coming up on our toes is probably a sense of overextension. It's like we're kind of giving up our ground and we're extending out into the world and overreaching a little bit. Which is, you know, if you notice that that was a pattern for you, or maybe I just wasn't clear in my description, so that's a possibility too. But for anybody who notices that that's a pattern for them, is to step up onto their toes, that's probably a sign of overreaching and giving up our ground in trying to get what we want. And part of what we want to practice is trying to extend from a grounded and centered place. Does that answer your question, Keela?
100%. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Were there any other questions? Anything else that came up in the chat, Denise?
Yes, here's a question from Bo. When I extended with my arm and hand open, it felt heavy versus when I had the fist. Any insight?
Well, there's a couple of things that are probably going on there. When we're extending with our fist and our entire body is going forward, what we're probably doing is, if I do that, let me just, you know, if I do something like this, it's like I'm kind of carrying a lot of weight down my back and into my legs that is supporting my body inside of holding that particular set of contractions. If I'm extending from a centered place, what I'm doing is I'm relaxing. And in relaxing, you know, it's a bit like those exercises that you do when somebody relaxes, you feel the weight a little bit more, like dead weight or something like that. So it's a little bit more weight that you might feel. But the thing to notice is, like, can I relax my shoulder inside of that? And if I can relax my shoulder, I can generally extend and be extended quite comfortably without feeling kind of feeling like the weight is too much. If I really extend my shoulder, then the chances are I'm going to start to really feel that in a short period of time. I'm going to really start to notice that tension in my shoulder and how that feels inside of my body. So the piece that I'd always look at is like, oh, is the shoulder being tensed up inside of that process? And then how can you bring more relaxation to the shoulder, more relaxation to the hands? And like, I'm extended from here. Does that make sense? Anything else, Denise? Or any the person who asked that? Oh, Rodney, you've got a hand up. Oh, I've got a hand up. Lovely.
Hi, Pete.
Hi, Rodney.
And thank you so much for doing these. I just find them very helpful, and it's a delight to see so many people on. I just would love to hear your reaction to this question. As I was practicing with everyone, and then noticing what's being triggered in me as I imagined potentially overextending or withdrawing. It occurred to me that if I were to practice like this as a meditation on my own, I'd like your reaction to how to think about protecting oneself through that imagery. For me, just now, I needed to place my hand on my solar plexus as I was overextending, and I was noticing in my body how that triggers some fight or flight or fawn in some cases. I'd just be curious your practice advice as it relates to that self-protective aspect of getting yourself out of center.
So let me just clarify your question. So it's protecting yourself when you're not centered as opposed to when you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, either, I suppose. Now that you say that, but yeah.
So inside of this work, we practice the off-center work in order to identify our patterns, but we don't want to stay there. We don't want to keep on practicing that. We find our patterns, we notice where they are, and then we start to try to notice them in life as they show up, because they will. Life will happen to us and we'll notice our patterns. So inside of that, the place that we want to go with that is when we notice those patterns is how quickly can we bring ourselves back to center. That's the arc of it. Now, when we're centered, there's a really interesting thing. One of the things that all of the centering and extension and presence invites is it invites a certain level of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain piece inside of that. There's a lot of strength available in that vulnerability. And then there's the other side of that, which is always that we want to be mindful of vulnerability. We want to be mindful of when and where we do that. And that not everywhere in this world, unfortunately, is it safe to do that. And so part of what we want to develop is at some level, some space of choice, some space of actually, where are the places where I need to put up more boundaries and go, actually, it is okay to withdraw here. It's okay to say, not here right now, or to exit this situation or exit this relationship, or to kind of put those appropriate boundaries up in order to look after ourselves. So I think the thing for me is like, we want to have the ability to be vulnerable and not get freaked out and overwhelmed by it. But we also want to have the capacity to put boundaries in place when we need to. Okay, that work?
Thank you. Appreciate that. Very helpful.
Welcome. I am going to hand over to Denise. Apologies, Denise. I'm a couple of minutes late in handing over to you. But if we hand over to you just to say a little bit about what's going to come up, and then I will close the session at the end.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for stepping in and asking your questions, and wanted to share with you a couple of quick things that I think are really helpful. So again, for those of you that might have joined us a little bit later, I am Denise Mays, and I am the enrollment director here at Strozzi Institute. And really consider me your partner in really helping you navigate what our coursework is and what we offer. And I just put in the chat our course calendar, which is our full list of what we have going on. And this goes out through the rest of the year. So if you're interested in any coursework that's coming up, that would be your #1 place to go. Foundation work for us, for our in-person work, is embodied transformation. And it's a 4-day course that really takes us through this arc of transformation, of which commitment and extension is part of that Pete took us through today. And I just put in the chat some of our upcoming dates that are coming in May and June. We have courses scheduled out through the year. And so we have that going. Oh, yes, and training in Europe. We do have some training that will be coming up. It is on that course calendar as well. And we do have some coursework that will be coming up in September in Barcelona. That is offered to our partners, and wonderful, wonderful opportunities to step into practice. Also wanted to share with you that we do have advanced coursework for those of you that have had an opportunity to step into some of our foundational work. Here is what is coming up this year. We have body work, we have somatic trauma and resilience, and also our embodied leadership pathway, which we're very excited to be starting in June for those of us that are leaders that want to use our embodiment to show up better in teams and to show up for our team members. Lastly, many of us are in the coaching world and want to step into coaching. We have our next coaching program in the US will be starting in October. We're also going to be rolling out our coaching program in Europe in November, and more information will be coming up on that very soon. You'll also find information on that in our course calendar. And lastly, I want to share with you all, we have an online community called Soma Community. It's where you can connect with others that are interested in somatic, and really would love to see you there. And lastly, I want to put in here my contact information. Please grab this before the call is over. This is my email. This is how you can contact me and schedule time with me. And also want to share with you that our next Community Dojo will be May 9th with Derek Silverman, and our subject will be shaping and conditioning. So I'm going to pass that back to you. And it's been my pleasure seeing you all today. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Denise. You managed to do that incredibly quickly. So apologies again for handing over a minute or two later than intended. Okay, so just before we finish and complete together as a group, just take a moment again, drop down into your bodies, feel your intention, feel your commitment, and center, feel your center. And then just as a last moment of practice, see if you can find a way to bring yourself towards centered extension from through your whole body. Connected to yourself, connected to what you care about, moving towards whatever it is that's truly important to you. And then whatever you move into next, see if you can hold on to that energy and bring that into the next conversation, the next phone call, the next meeting with your family, with your friends, business partners, whatever it is, bring that in with you and see what impact it has. And that's the starting point of beginning a new practice. Thank you for your time. Lovely to see you all.